Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Social Media CX podcast. Today, we are having our very first care chat, which is where I talk to you, the people who are actually in the trenches of social media having challenges, let's just call them. And today, I'll be talking to friend and social media strategist Sarah Scott. We'll be tackling the tricky balance of engaging with untagged feedback on social, as well as managing online complainers in a way that stands out. You won't want to miss this episode because I answer Sarah's questions with tactical, practical advice that anybody can follow. Enjoy! Welcome to the Social Media CX podcast, where social media meets customer experience and where all fires, no rainbows is the current reality for most brands. I'm Brooke Sellis, CEO of B Squared Media, and I'm on a mission to change that. Social media can be the MVP of your CX strategy, and I'm here to show you how. Each week, we'll tackle the challenges of social care head-on with candid interviews, real-world case studies, and actionable advice to turn your social channels into loyalty-building, revenue-driving dopamine machines. Whether you're managing customer complaints, trying to engage meaningfully, or just tired of missing DMs, this podcast is your guide to putting out the fires and building the rainbows. Hey everybody, welcome to the inaugural Care Chat segment of the Social Media CX podcast. I am so excited to have my friend Sarah here today to dive into real world challenges and burning questions about social media and social media customer care. Today, we're going to talk about the central question of how can brands use social care strategies to turn even those tough conversations, sometimes the toughest conversations, into standout customer experiences. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Yay! So glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. You are a seasoned social media professional with a knack for doing event-based social engagement, which is easy if we're saying it.
It's not easy, but it's the fun. As far as I'm concerned, it's the fun stuff.
It is fun. I think it's fun too. But as somebody who used to plan events for a long time for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, I always know that you know what's happening. Like when stuff goes wrong, it's just making sure the audience doesn't find out. So I'm sure that part is very stressful, especially from the social media side.
Yes. Yes, always. And it's really interesting because, like I said, I think it's a lot of fun because, creating content is so easy, I think, with events. And people want to talk about it, which I think is always the best part about it. But the downside is that people also want to complain about it.
They're going to talk about it, which means complain.
Yeah, the complaints are the things that get me. And that's why, like, when you open the care chat up, my first question, and it came to mind too when I was listening to Bart's episode, that you guys were talking about, luxury customer care, even if it's online. And the very first thing I think about is all of the complainers that we get, because there will be, right? They complain about price. They complain about value. They complain about the acts. They complain about whatever. The food was bad. Whatever. Pick your topic. There's always going to be somebody online.
Yeah.
And we have taken an approach over the years that I've worked with my customers. We've sort of taken the approach that we try to address them if possible. If it's, reasonable enough, we will try to address it. If it gets stupid snarky, for lack of better terms, we will hide them.
Stupid
snarky. Like you just sort of like,
not just
come
snarky.
on. No, this
Stupid
is beyond. This is beyond just snarky. But we'll hide those because we don't really want to inflare more people to engage in that conversation. And if by some chance we decide we're going to leave it because, of course, it looks fake if there's no downside, right? We look at social media interactions and we say to ourselves, oh, everything's always positive. They must be hiding the negative. So we will keep some of the negatives in there. But if it incites like a riot online and everybody's talking about it, then we'll go ahead and hide that. So my curiosity, though, was piqued because, by the way, it doesn't seem like I'm the only one that does this, because I've had conversations with other social media managers who tend to do the same things, especially around paid ads. I know we focus a lot, too, on paid when that happens. But we have always taken that approach of great, we understand you probably have a complaint, but our platform and our audience isn't going to be your soapbox to stand on and do your complaining with. Go find somebody else's platform to do it on. I know, probably a terrible perspective, but after a while you get kind of you get kind of fed up with some of these people.
We're all jaded, okay? We
We're all
work
a
in
little
social
jaded.
media.
You have to be, especially now, you poor souls. But so my question really then came down to, again, after talking with you guys or listening to you guys, was, is there a better way to handle it? Should we be doing something differently than how we've been handling it in the past that maybe can get us around hiding those comments and might actually improve the strength of the brand versus just, trying to like skirt it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen?
Yeah, I love that. So how should companies handle complainers online, especially during events, is what I heard you say.
Yeah, especially during the events.
And listen, I get what you're saying about hiding comments because this is a common tactic, like you've said. Oh, I would say 10 times out of 10, when we've taken on a client for social care, especially, right? Not just social media management, but for like the actual like customer support, sales support through
Yeah.
social media, 10 out of 10 times that has been part of the strategy is
Yeah.
to hide comments. So this is a very common thing, but I'm really glad you asked the question because my viewpoint is not to hide the comment. And before you get all up in arms, y'all who are listening or watching, just hear me out, okay, for 1 second. I want you to reframe the mindset that you have and put yourself in the complainer's shoes because we're all consumers. And Sarah, be honest, have you complained on social media about something or someone, a brand?
Not without intent. So knowing what I know about being a social media manager, I don't complain just for the sake of complaining. There is intent behind it. But yes,
Yes.
I have.
Yes. Okay, we all have, I think, right?
Mhm.
Complainers are often passionate customers. And I want you to like this is kind of our little like silly little motto. You know me, I love like little stupid songs and rhymes and anything cheesy and I'm all in, right? Double the cheese on my burger. But if they didn't care, they wouldn't have taken the time to share.
Aw.
Right? Cue audience.
No, I know. Um, ah.
I know. So let me tell you what to do, right? Instead of hiding the comments, here are the alternatives. Give an empathetic response. Yes, even in public, even when there's other people watching. Well, that's what social media is. It's a
Right.
spectator sport. I mean, everybody's watching all the time,
Mhm.
but it helps diffuse the tension. And you were talking about how people like kind of pile on and add on, and it just grows and grows
Yes.
and grows, and it becomes this really ugly monster. I
Mhm.
think if we not always, but I think if we start out with like that empathetic, tell me more, like Bart said, right? Like, we want to fix
Yeah.
this for you. Tell me more. You're immediately diffusing the tension for a, um, I don't want to use the word normal, but for most human beings, you're immediately
Mhm.
saying, I want to hear you out, right? So that's going
Right.
to diffuse the tension. And I think because you've diffused that tension, it's going to stop some of that pile on that you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. That's what I wonder.
I also
Is
think you should invite your complainers to tell you more
Mhm.
on DMs or email or private message, right? We're going to try to move the conversation offline.
Yeah.
And third, I think, for me, the way I teach it is that complaints are really the only opportunity that you have to change. Complaints are the only way that you know that your
That's
brand
tr
isn't perfect, right? So if I know, say, for this event client, that 10 times out of 10, people are complaining about the parking lot or the parking situation.
Mhm.
I know if I fix that parking situation or that parking lot, I'm going to retain more customers. And if I retain more customers, I'm going to get more customers, especially with events, because events rely a lot on word of mouth. And then
Yes.
the last piece of advice I'm going to give you, and then I'm going to shut up, is if you're hiding or deleting comments, you're not able to collect that voice of customer data, right? So if you're not collecting that parking
Mhm.
lot complaint and putting it even into a spreadsheet, you don't necessarily have to be using social listening. But even if you put it into a spreadsheet and you're tracking kind of these different complaints for the event within
Right.
different themes of the event, pretty soon you're going to realize like who's complaining to complain and what are some real issues that we might need to address as a company, a brand, or an event.
Right. That's interesting. See, that's interesting. And I do think that's something we're missing out on. So we do tend, like I said, we do tend to hide, and we kind of like, it's like scared it under the rug. Didn't really happen. Um, and I don't think we're collecting that information to look at more objectively to say, all right, are they complaining just to complain? Or is there enough of this same complaint that it's a valid concern to our customers that we really need to decide how do we want to handle it? Is it intentional? For example, a price increase. Sometimes there's nothing we can do. Like we needed to increase our
Right.
prices. It is what it is. And
Right.
yes, people are going to complain about it. But if we look at that and we say, okay, is this intentional? And I, a lot of times too, with price, at least from my perspective, when people are complaining about price, I look at it as a value recognition. So if they aren't necessarily complaining that you raise the price, they're just not seeing the value for the price given. So
Mm-hmm.
that's, again, I think if we were to get into this, tell me more thing that you're saying, like, tell me more about why you think the price is too high or why you think this is
Yes.
unfair. That may also collect some data for us to help us understand and change our messaging down the road to help extract that value better to show people why or what we were doing. So, and I
Right.
don't think we're doing that. I know we're not doing that in the long run. Again, just there's no complainers out there. We're perfect. We're lovely. Everybody loves us.
Our brand is perfect.
See, and
No, but I
that's
think
such a red flag. Like nobody's brand's perfect.
that brings me to my next point perfectly. I think even if it is pricing, but you were to go out and put a post out that says like, "Hey, we're raising prices, and here let us tell you why." Right?
Right.
And then give the actual for real. It's not just we raise them because we want to put more money in our pockets. And if it is,
Right.
figure out how to not make it that.
Right.
But
Right.
most of us don't raise prices unless we have to. Like, listen, we have to raise prices a lot of times because, which is a great thing, by the way, but our team members stay with us on average like 4 to 5 years. Well,
Right.
we're not going to pay someone the same rate that we paid them in year one as we do in year three, as we do in year five.
Right.
We have to increase prices for our clients because we want to pay those account managers well and keep them on the team. So, in return,
Right.
this is what I do. I tell our clients as we go to renew, like, look, Sarah was at a beginner for you in the past couple of years. She since has proven herself, as you've seen by XYZ things that she's done for you, right?
Yep.
And we're going to pay her for that because she deserves to be paid well for delivering these services and always being on time and all these wonderful things that
Yeah.
Sarah does. For that reason, your new rate will be X, right?
Right.
And that feels, I mean, how does it feel to you if you were the client and I said that?
Well, yeah, it's completely understandably. Okay, great. I totally get it. Understood.
Yeah, right? Or you're
Because
just
you
like,
don't want
forget
to
it, I
lose that
can't pay that,
person.
which is fine.
Right.
You may not be able to fit that budget anymore, but that doesn't mean we're going to take that rate away from Sarah. We're going to pay
Right.
Sarah what she's worth.
Right.
So I think if you address it head on with the transparency of why the pricing has changed, you'll turn some of those skeptics into advocates. You'll answer some of those questions right away. You'll still
Right.
get those, naysayers and whatever.
Right.
But I think you kind of attack it head on. It's a little more proactive than
Yeah, it's
reactive,
absolutely
which I
more
like.
proactive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, hiding, it could erode trust if it's discovered. Like we talked about this before, but
Yeah.
when you hide on Facebook, the user can still see that it's there, but other people see that it's not there.
Right.
But like say Sarah and Brooke like are complaining about some
Battling
event
it
and
out.
Sarah says something and it goes away and I'm like, your comment's not there anymore. And you're like, what? I still see it. And I'm like, no, I don't. We know then that the brand has hidden that comment and
Mhm.
that could feel like they're doing something wrong, even if they're not, right?
Right.
Even if we're being the aggressors.
Right. Right. It's still, then you start seeing new comments pop in and say, oh, you hid my old
You're
comment.
deleting, we've had this too. You're
Yep.
deleting comments. You're hiding comments. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I still go back to, it's my platform. I still built this. You want to build a platform? Go ahead. You have the power to do so.
No, I'm with you, but I
I
think
know.
it's just trust. It all comes down to trust.
Right.
Every year, the Edelman Trust Barometer comes out, and every year we do worse. with trust as brands to, companies and brands to consumers.
Right.
And so the number one thing we need to fix if we want loyalty, if we want repeat customers, is trust. So these are things that are going to help you build that trust.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now I'm going to give you some. Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead. What are you going to give me?
I was going to give you some actionable takeaways.
Oh.
To do these things, if
Yes,
that's
please.
okay with you. Okay. Response templates. Do you have like responses scripted out?
Do you?
Yes.
No, we do not.
Yes, we do. Okay. I want you to draft response templates that give that empathy and that professionalism, but do not copy and paste over and over again. Like if it's you or if it's someone else on the team, give them the leeway to zhuzh slightly so that it's not robotic, right? Or we're not just copying and pasting every time.
Right.
Train your teams or yourself to know when to de-escalate publicly or escalate internally. So the de-escalation is the whole tell me more, right?
Right.
And then escalation internally means like if Sarah is complaining about the parking of this event and we know that she brings 10 families. So we're talking in excess of maybe 20 cars, right?
Right.
I need to escalate this and let Sarah talk to someone internally, the event planner or whomever it may be, because Sarah's bringing in the money.
Right.
I don't want to just brush Sarah off and be like, we're working on it. Right? Okay.
Right.
And then the last thing is I want you to emphasize the tone of consistency in responses. So once you decide how you're going to tackle these things, like try to keep it consistent. Because, as I'm sure you already know, if you're like, oh, Sarah, we'll give you VIP parking in the front. Brooke comes through who maybe doesn't bring 10 families, but brings 5. And she's like, what about me? I bring 5 families. So you got to try to keep it and then escalate internally, right? Mm-hmm. The owners might say something to Sarah that they don't offer to Brooke. That's up to them. Let them make that call.
Right. Not mine.
No, yeah.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I like the idea of templates, especially since I'm an external consultant to these events that I work on. I'd rather it be their stamp on it that says, this is how we'd like to respond, or this is the voice, or this is the structure around which, or the wording we want to use for this type of complaint.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I can put it together, but I'm not the brand. I'm just the consultant. So.
Yes. And a lot of times on our end, this is us, passing on to like HR and legal. Mm-hmm. And we have to get many steps of approvals, but that's okay. I'm happy to have that. And I'm also at the same time working on them saying, we're not going to be copying and pasting this. We're going to have some leeway here so that we can respond in a personalized, empathetic way. So they also kind of have to sign off that like, hey, we're not just going to like blindly copy and paste this to every person that asks this question because that looks bad.
Yeah, I've gotten called out on that one too. Again, wasn't my call to do said thing that way, but it was what we were doing. And people notice it after a while. You're right. This was a different thing altogether. I was working on paid ads for a lawyer. And there was only so much we could actually say to anybody that asked questions online. Like we had to direct them to go into, if you had questions, you had to talk to somebody. There was privacy issues and all kinds of things that apparently nobody thinks about when they're commenting online about their health issues.
Out there. Yeah.
It's really crazy. Yeah. Like I'm not responding to this. And like, again, I'm not the lawyer. I'm the external consultant. So yeah, we had like very generic boilerplate comments that went back and people were like, oh, this is just a bot. I'm like, no, there's just really nothing else we can say besides you got to talk to the lawyer. And when I've got 200 comments on here about this, there ain't much else I can say. But it does, even still in those instances, again, it does feel body, right? Like it just feels like there's a bot that's coming in here and just automatically responding without actually having any consideration around that. And that I can completely understand trying to avoid that as much as humanly possible.
Oh, yeah. I would say in like really difficult situations, especially when it comes to like healthcare, insurance, doctors, lawyers, what we found is bots are probably not the right answer to help answer even those frequently asked questions. So yeah, I'm totally in line with you there. Are you ready to master social media customer experience? My online course, Mastering Social Media CX, gives you a step-by-step blueprint to turn conversations into conversions. And just for you, my podcast listeners, you get an exclusive 60% off. Yeah, 60%. All you have to do is use the code SMCX, as in social media customer experience, at checkout. Don't miss your chance to level up your social care game. Head on over to b2media/courses and start transforming your strategy today. So you actually had another question, which I thought was also amazing because it's but the answer is based on one of my favorite topics ever. But
Oh,
I'm
yeah?
going to go ahead and read your question to the audience if that's okay with you.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so Sarah's second question is, what is the best way to engage with untagged feedback? Should we engage at all? So
Mhm.
explain this scenario for everybody who's listening or watching, and then I'll
Mhm.
dive in.
All right. So again, because my client is a county fair, we've got all kinds of, let's say, tech savvy individuals that engage with us on Facebook or Instagram. Some of them are extremely tech savvy, and when they, post about the event, they will tag us in the post so that we can see it and we will engage, usually, heart, comment, like something, like we'll acknowledge the fact that we've been tagged. But there are also folks that do not tag us, and they will still post out there in, the world and say something about the event. And sometimes that would lead us to, sometimes it's led us to good things, like in terms of like we had a vendor once who posted and said, "Hey, what do you think of this fair?" I happened to see it because it was like in my personal stratosphere that it showed up. And so we logged in as the brand and we said, we think we're great. We love us." And it worked because she was announcing that she was going to be at the fairgrounds for that event. But when it really comes down to it, like those are the good things. But even then, I wonder, should we engage when it wasn't tagged, whether intentional or not intentional? Should we have engaged with that? And then every now and again, we do trip over the negative as well, where there are bigger complaints or other things going on. Again, as I said in the first part, like sometimes we say, not my platform. Well, it might not be my platform, but they did take to their platform to do that complaining, and we weren't tagged. Therefore, we weren't aware of what was going on.
Mhm.
And so, we wouldn't have been able to de-escalate or wouldn't have been able to get involved if we hadn't been actively looking for it. So that was why I've wondered that in the past. Sometimes we get involved, sometimes we don't. But what's the right thing? What should we be doing?
This one's tricky because the content wasn't meant to directly involve you.
Right.
It's about you, but if they're not tagging you, they're probably intentionally not directly involving you.
Right.
Really quick though, let's take a back step and talk about what tagging versus untagging means for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about. So when you tag a company or a brand on social media, you use the little @ symbol, the little A with a circle around it, and you start typing in the brand name and it pulls up like blue, like what that brand is, and then you hit the little button and it tags them. I hope I'm explaining this right, but I think most people know what tagging is, but just in case. Um, so you could tag like B Squared Media on LinkedIn, or you could tag if you are not a business. If you're a person, you could tag me, but if you're a business on LinkedIn, you can't tag me, Brooke Sellis, right?
Right.
So untagged is when someone talks about that business or that person or even products of that brand. So, like, for instance, I could tag Nike if I wanted to involve them, or I could say something like, I just bought these Air Jordans and they suck. Now, I've mentioned Air Jordans. I have not tagged Nike, but I'm giving voice of customer data either way about
Right.
Nike. So let's start by acknowledging again, this is tricky. And what should you do when someone tags you in a positive way and in a negative way? Let's start with the positive, please.
Please.
Celebrate and engage with gratitude like you did. Like highlight the organic nature of the content and turn it into a brand moment. Like, oh, hey, Sarah, we were, looking at our brand mentions. We're so happy we found this post, even though you didn't tag us, because woohoo, we're so excited or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like you're like letting them know in a non-creepy way, like, hi, we can see what you say about us, even when you don't tag us. And thank you for saying wonderful things, right?
Right.
And then if it's negative, I would gauge the tone and the intent, because so in the situation that you gave in that positive situation, you can still tag that as like, you can tag it as UGC, user generated content, right? And
Right.
ask Sarah if she'd be open to us sharing that review or that feedback. With the negative, it's the same as we talked about earlier. We want to know what the negative is. We want to be able to tag or
Right.
label it as, parking lot issue or pricing issue or whatever it may be. And then if we do decide to engage, right, passively, we always want to collect the voice of customer data. And then proactively, we want to, if we decide to get involved, avoid defensiveness and approach it with that curiosity and empathy. So it's just going back to tell me more again, like, hey Sarah, I see you had a rough time parking at our event last weekend. Can you tell me more? I'd love to figure out how we could help you and fix this in the future.
Right. Hmm.
So,
I just feel so creepy though, I have to admit, like, especially on the negative side,
I
like,
know.
but yeah, it's figuring out, I guess it's really figuring out when, and because it's so hard otherwise to engage, like, you can't privately engage with these folks because, you can't, like, with
You
all
can't reach out to
intentionality,
them.
you don't want to
Right.
reach out, like, they don't want you privately reaching out, like, they being,
Right.
the conglomerates
Right.
of social media. Totally understand, because God knows how many people would say abuse that to death.
Oh yeah.
Um, so the only way to engage would be in a public forum or in a public way to be able to get into their comments about that. So again, it's one of those things I always find really interesting. The other thing where we find the untagged feedback sometimes too, this is just for anybody who may not be paying attention, like on Facebook. Facebook will tell you how many times your post has been shared. And if you click on that, if you didn't know, you can also then see who shared it, if depending on their settings. But you can also see who shared it and what they said about that share. So
Mhm.
again, not tagged, but they're using your stuff to share out, and you can see like what other people had said too. So again,
Yeah.
just another way of engaging as well that sometimes doesn't show up automatically in some of our feeds. And again, we've engaged with stuff with that as well, like thanks for the share, thanks for, spreading the news, whatever, but again, I don't feel as bad about it or as weird when it's celebrating the really fun stuff that people are sharing about us. It's
Yeah.
when it's the negatives we bump into, it's then, okay, what do we do about it?
I just wouldn't even like talk about it unless they ask, in which case you can tell them you use social listening or advanced search, so your social tools, because you care about
We
your
do.
brand
Right.
reputation. Yeah.
Right.
Um, I also think like this such brings up such a greater point about social media in general, social media marketing, social care, any aspect of social media, advertising, all of the above.
Mhm.
We're so used to marketers as to we always are taught, and I feel like everybody does this, but we're always reactive.
Yeah.
We're always waiting for that stuff to come to us. And what you just said about checking the shares and going and commenting on those, because those people might end up being a like or a customer or whatever. We've got to get proactive, especially
Mhm.
with all the changes social media is going through right now.
Right.
Like, being proactive is how you will stay alive on social media with your brand or your company. So
Yeah.
I love that you said that. And then my actionable takeaways here for you, Sarah, are use social listening, which you knew I was going to say
Of
because
course.
I'm a huge advocate. But basically, what social media listening does, if you don't know, is it allows you to put in like a Boolean search, like a query around your brand, your products, your competitors. So Nike would obviously have their brand name Nike, but then they might also want to put in like their most popular products, like Air Jordans. So
Mhm.
if they had social listening and I said my Air Jordans suck, even though I didn't tag Nike or anything to do with Air Jordans or hashtag it or whatever, social listening would bring that conversation to their inbox the same way it would have if they would have gotten tagged in the
Right.
conversation. And then they have the choice to passively collect that voice of customer data and or join the conversation.
Mm.
So, huge proponent of social listening. And I would say respond only to these untagged situations if it adds value.
Yeah.
Otherwise, take it to a DM, keep it private, give it a little heart. If it's somebody just saying, like, oh my God, y'all were great, heart,
Right.
right? You don't always have to respond. I would just keep the responses on these proactive, untagged things if it adds a lot of value to
Yeah.
you in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think the biggest takeaway for me right now is collecting that data in a meaningful way. Because again, I know we aren't doing any of that. And I'm kind of embarrassed now that I haven't been. So thankfully my client doesn't know I'm on here. Um,
We won't tell them
we'll
that
do
you
better this year. We'll do better.
Yes. Make it a
Um,
2025 goal. You don't have to use a tool. A lot of social tools have like a tag or a label feature within the tool. If they don't, just use a spreadsheet. Slap it into a spreadsheet.
yeah.
The fact that you're quantifying this data, this voice of customer data for the client should be hugely impressive, no matter if you're doing it in a spreadsheet or with a tool, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what would you say your biggest takeaway is from today's discussion, and how do you think you'll approach these challenges moving forward?
I think the biggest thing that always hit me, with this is what you said in the beginning, which is that the complainers are actually consider them being, you're probably a big fan of some way, shape, or form, and you've probably hurt their feelings inadvertently, like
Mhm.
completely unintentionally. But thinking about it from that perspective, again, I have kids. It's like kids lash out because they think you've hurt them, even over the offense of like the wrong colored cup. Where really it's not the end of the day, but you've inadvertently done something to them and they are expressing that. And I always think the complainers are just the people who hate you and just want to say that anyway, rather than maybe being somebody who was or is a fan and is just looking to have a need met, right? They've
Mhm.
got something they wanted to express, something they're unhappy with. Maybe they don't know how else to reach out to say that. And social media is sometimes the faceless void that makes it easier for us to say the things we wouldn't be able to say to other people.
Yeah, cheesy alert. If
Yeah.
they took the time to share, they probably care. It's because they probably care. Like, that's what I try to remember, right? That little
Yeah.
Jiminy Cricket voice comes into my head and helps me try to remember, like, or
Yep.
Mr. Rogers or whoever your voice is in your head, right?
Yeah.
To try to remember what it is the other side's trying to convey, like,
Yeah.
putting empathy, like literal empathy, putting
Yeah.
yourself in their shoes.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. I think it's really great. And like I said, the biggest actionable takeaway is going to be actually documenting this and maybe getting some scripts down as we go too. Will make life a lot
yeah.
easier.
My job here, son. Okay, bye. No, I'm just kidding. Um, so if you've been listening or if you haven't, and for some reason you skipped right to the end, here's the show in a nutshell. I'm doing the little nutshell thing if you're watching. Um, encourage I encourage you all to see social media care as an opportunity. And what we are talking about is care, right? Even if it's just these comments that we're looking at, it's not a burden. Every comment, positive or negative, is a chance to make someone feel seen and valued. And that's what great social media CX is all about. And I also want to say, if you have any questions about social media, social care, social CX, please send me your questions. If you're brave like Sarah and you actually want to come on the show and do a chat like this, I'm saying yes right now, as long as that question involves social media. Send me the questions if you don't want to be on. Like, just help us help you. Help me help you help yourself or your clients. Uh Thank you, Sarah, so much for being on today's episode. Make sure that you tune in weekly to catch the next shows. Oh, coming up next month, we have Joshua St. Aubin with Organic Valley. I drink their half and half, which is amazing, by the way. But you will not want to miss what he has to say about user experience and social media. It's so good. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you feel like it, if you loved this episode, leave a review. Bye, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to the Social Media CX podcast. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to up their social care game.